Greetings, and welcome to the first major progress update video for ModTown 2015, where we're going to be featuring a lot of the progress that we've made in the last 2 months since we announced the ModTown 2015 project, a project by the community, for the community. Now, unfortunately, due to the way that ModTown works, a lot of the files and progress I'm going to be showing are actually mine, because most people aren't going to be submitting their completed works until they're actually finished. So a lot of modder plots and public buildings that are nearly finished aren't going to be shown here. Instead, I'll be focusing mostly on my own work, along with about 3 modder plots from other modders, and a few public buildings that have been designed by other modders. But this will at least give you an idea of sort of the direction we've been going in with ModTown 2015. And we're starting out sort of with the district I was building for the Imperial mod episode, episode 38, where I was sort of featuring Barabus's models here, and this is going to be an actual block in ModTown 2015. And some of these buildings I've already designed interiors for, and I've also included this sort of cool little marketplace over here, sort of a plaza. All these vendors have already been detailed. You've got a weapons vendor, food vendor, a miscellaneous items vendor, small book vendor. You know, just a bunch of little things. And sort of moving on to the first interior I'm going to be showcasing, and again, most of the interiors I will be showcasing on my own, since I'm still waiting on other modders to submit their works to showcase them. And this is just a sort of small house that's owned by someone fairly well-to-do. I should point out, again, that all these houses that I'm going to be showing are available for modder avatars. Like, for example, if you don't want to actually build your own house and just want to submit a modder avatar with maybe a little bit of dialogue, you can do that, and this could be your avatar's house. Or this house, for example. This is another house that's in the same neighborhood. Now, you notice that the Barabus Imperial Housing resource doesn't actually have any interior tile sets, so I'm just using common Imperial tile sets here, which I think works fairly well. Now, you're also going to notice a lot of new items in these interiors, and this is actually from the Silverus Miscellaneous Items package. And I'm going to be showcasing that in the next episode of Morrowind Modding Showcases. It's a really nice package, includes around, I think, 120 to 200 different unique items just scattered about your houses, and most of them are just retextures of existing items, but you know, they add a bit of variety to the environment. Now, ultimately, if these buildings don't get claimed by a modder avatar or a player avatar, since, you know, you don't have to be a modder to submit work for the project, you can come up with a character name, for example, and write up some dialogue, and that can just become an NPC in the mod, and you don't actually have to open up the construction set or anything like that. But if that doesn't happen, a lot of these buildings will become owned by probably NPC merchants or other wealthy NPCs that'll provide services for ModTown. And sort of going on to this next building here, this is a partially complete apartment building that I've been working on for about 7 or 8 development hours. It has around 700 hand-placed objects, and I'd say it's maybe 60 to 65% complete at this point. It's an apartment building with 5 apartments. 3 of them have been finished, and the other 2 are still sort of being worked on. And you'll notice that there is no interior lighting in here. That's because interior lighting is always the last thing I add to any interior I develop. It's just sort of my interior building process, so to speak. And you are going to notice sort of my hallmark with interior design is that I like to add lots and lots of clutter. That means there's bottles everywhere, there's clothing strewn about, and books just, you know, scattered everywhere. It's just sort of how I like to design interiors, you know, sort of give them that lived-in feel, like someone is actually living here and has a sort of messy approach, because life is messy. You know, when you're finished drinking a bottle, you're just going to throw it on the ground somewhere, or you might do the responsible thing and recycle it, but I don't think they have a recycling program in Morrowind. Right outside of this apartment building is a nice little hidden area that's just sort of completely enclosed by buildings on all sides, and only really has one way in, and this is a sort of hidden detail I love to add into my creations for the player to discover, though it does kind of serve a utilitarian function as well. As you probably noticed, there was a water well there in the corner, and you can imagine that the dwellers of this apartment building probably came out there to collect water or whatever else you might imagine. And right here we have the central plaza of ModTown, and a lot of these buildings already have interiors built in for them. And again, most of these interiors are of my own creation. It's not that I'm being egotistical and only showing my own interiors, it's just that at this point most of the finished interiors for ModTown are the ones that I've created myself. Not to say that there isn't a bunch of really awesome looking interiors being made by all the other modders on ModTown. We have about 39 modders so far that have contributed or are working on claims for ModTown, and some of them are working on some really fantastic interiors like Auto Clock, Melkor Dark, and Cairo mods. And like, for example, Auto Clock's Mages Guild looks absolutely fantastic, and I encourage you guys to just go to our forums at Dark Elf Modding and just sort of check out all these albums and screenshots that we have posted there, because some of it is just quite fantastic looking. And anyway, sort of going on to this next building here, this is the Merchant Hall, and what the purpose of this building is exactly is that it's a building for a bunch of common traders and merchants to just sort of have vendor stalls and these small little shops all under the same roof, and it operates a lot like a mall. You know, like a shopping mall, where you go in, you might find an alchemist, an enchanter, a bookseller, a booze vendor. There's also an armorer's in the basement, and ModTown is going to have quite a few smithies, I'm afraid. I've personally built at least 3 smithy shops for ModTown already, and I know there's plans for a few more, so we got quite a few of those. There's also a bit of a small guest bedroom area down here for traders that are visiting from other places to just come and stay. And down here we also have a bit of a pub. And obviously this all looks a bit empty because there's no NPCs yet. And hopefully we'll start adding in NPCs by the next time we do a progress update video. Now many of you will probably recognize this next area here since we did show it off in the Modders Resource portion of episode 37 of Morrowind Modding Showcases, and the resources being used here are from the Wanderer's Mod Pack, an excellent Modders Resource package that I highly recommend checking out. And this is just a sort of quiet, quaint, peaceful neighborhood with a few residential dwellings, which again I designed. I do apologize about that. It's just that this particular area of ModTown, the sort of east and central portion of ModTown, is an area where I've designed a lot of the buildings, and we'll be moving on to a different part of ModTown shortly. And this particular house here was actually built for ModTown 2011, a project which sadly died, and I decided to include it in ModTown 2015 to just sort of save on resources and help quicken up the progress on the project. And this next building here is of course from episode 37, many of you will recognize it. And again, I would just like to say that these buildings are open for modder or player avatars. You just need a character name, some dialogue and a background story. It's just a little bit of writing, very simple to do. You don't need to open up the construction set, and that's something we can add in and sort of populate these interiors with NPCs with. And this next area of ModTown that we're looking at is the eastern portion of ModTown. There's a lot of finished modder plots here, like symbiote dinosaurs, hyros, and also Turlocks. Or Turlocks, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. You have an Enchanted Shop over here designed by Turlock. And a lot of these buildings you see scattered about are placeholders for future buildings. You also notice there's a lot of plots here which are already claimed. We do have some new claims open up for you guys if you want to make a modder claim of your own. And this right here is Turlock's house. It's an interesting combination of Halalu, Telvanni, and Dwemer architecture. And here you can see Turlock's interior, which is an interesting mix of furnishings, including a cliff racer dangling from the ceiling. And Turlock has included his model avatar here with a little bit of unique dialogue. And all that's already built into the game, and it's, you know, you can play through it. It's a nice looking interior. There's also a bit of a basement with some secrets. I mean, many of the modder plots here are going to have some pretty large secrets hidden underneath them. I mean, modders are like that. They like to build crazy, massive things underneath everything, like this giant Dwemer room here. Needless to say, you'll find an absolute ton of hidden secret areas and Easter eggs all over ModTown 2015. And this next interior we're going to be looking at is an Enchanted Shop run by a Khajiit proprietor, including some unique dialogue, And this is another interior designed by Turlock. And this is of course where you'd go to buy some enchanted scrolls, soul gems, and a few unique items that you'll only find in ModTown 2015. And of course, it should be pointed out that this interior has not quite been merged with the master file yet, but it will probably be included in the next update. And this next interior we're going to be looking at is a large Nordic mead hall that plays the home for the modern avatar of Hero. And he has an interesting cast of characters here with that talking wolf there, and this is his modern avatar, with some unique dialogue, including the choice to give you some free booze or mead as you so desire. And of course it has to be mentioned that it's really easy to make a home for ModTown 2015. You don't have to do anything too elaborate, or you can go all out and make the most elaborate thing possible. You can be as original as you want, or use any design that you want, like a Nordic design here, or a Rodarin design, or what have you. And this next interior that we're looking at is the esteemed Elite Inn. This is one of the main taverns in ModTown 2015. It's right off the central plaza of ModTown. And this is another interior that I've designed. You can probably tell though, since it has that sort of classic dark elf kind look with clutter everywhere and a bunch of scattered tables that are just filled to the brim with different items. There's a lot of dining here, and you got a food preparation area down here, like basically a kitchen really, in the basement. And it's a fairly decent sized interior. I think it has about 800 hand-placed items. There's a bedroom down here for the owner. And there's also an upstairs with a few renter rooms, some rooms for travelers and merchants and passerbys. And it's really just sort of a moderately well-to-do typical tavern, truth be told, with a few interesting nooks and crannies like this sort of library area here. And this next building we're looking at is right next door. It's the home of Symbiote Dinosaur. It's a Rodarin style house. And this is his avatar right here. He doesn't have a whole lot of dialogue, but he has a ton of services available. And the next part of ModTown we're going to be looking at is over on the eastern side. This area right here is called High Street, and it was built pretty much entirely by Melkor Dark. He's done a lot of world building without necessarily telling anyone else he was going to be building this stuff. But it's a really great design regardless. Melkor Dark is a wonderful world builder. It's really great to have him making the landmass for ModTown 2015 because he's one of the best. I mean, if you played Lithodonia, you know it's just absolutely fantastic. And this area over here is mostly home to a bunch of modder claims, and a lot of these are still available actually, like 23 here, 22, and 21. If you want to make a really small modder claim like a shack or maybe a Nordic house, this is probably right up your alley. These claims are very small. 26 over here I think has been claimed, and I know 28 has. But a few of these other ones are still available. And there's also a fort down here, sort of on the harbor entrance for ModTown 2015. And this is again something that Melkor Dark just sort of did on his own. We don't have an interior established for this yet, and it might actually end up being built as part of ModTown 2015's main questline. That hasn't exactly been decided yet. That's still something we're working on. And this is one of the interiors of High Street right here. This was designed by Morticius, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's a nice typical NPC home. It has a few NPCs, but they don't have any dialogue. There's a living room upstairs, and there's a bit of a alchemy lab and kitchen down here. And Morticius actually designed a few unique models for this interior, including some emerald dice that you can sort of see on the table here. And there's going to be a ton of just random unique items like that. And here's another one of the houses on High Street, and this one was designed by Melkor Dark as a sort of NPC home. It's very small, sort of on the quaint side, with a bit of a cozy feeling. And one of the major features of ModTown 2015 is going to be the modern memorials. And Morrowind is a very old game. It's been around for 13 years, and over that time we've lost a lot of modders to illness or sudden deaths, like Grumpy, Coral, and Lord Devil. And in order to remember those modders by, we thought we'd include a memorial to them in ModTown 2015, and that's going to be located here. This is being designed by Istredify, and the actual modern memorial shrine is being made by Drakemore. In fact, he has a few videos of the shrine on his YouTube channel if you want to check those out. And we're also going to be including some unique memorials for modders that we know passed away, like Lord Devil. That one's already been designed by Melkor Dark, and we're going to also be including one for Coral at some point. And this next bit that we're showing off here is the ModTown 2015 sewers. This is going to be a very large sort of dungeon-like complex underneath ModTown 2015. The basic layout was designed by Symbiote Dinosaur, but it's being decorated by Cairo Mods. This is going to have a lot more detail when it's actually finished, sort of a Balmora Underworld feel. And it is going to be used to sort of connect a bunch of random dungeons down here. In fact, you'll be finding tons of unique stuff down in the sewers once everything's all finished and hooked up together. And sort of going on to areas outside of ModTown itself, to the rest of the island, so to speak, there are just tons of really great world-building aspects that Melkor has included. I mean, we really lucked out with Melkor designing the landmass, particularly considering that he was working on Lithodonia at the same time that he was working on this. I mean, like this goat pasture here, it's just really well done. It's a nice bit of world detail that just adds a ton to the uniqueness of the island. And here's a few more wilderness shots over here. And we do have some modder claims out in this area. I don't think any of them have actually been finished at this point. And there were 9 modder plots out in the wilderness. I think they were all pretty much claimed within the first week. So I'm afraid there aren't any more available, though we might be making some more available in the future if we have the time and resources and if there's enough demand. And here once again we have Melkor's amazing world building skills on display with this sort of Daedric tower that connects over the bridge here to, you know, something up on this mountain over here. I mean, we haven't really finished working on the dungeons or anything yet, so we don't exactly know what all this is going to be yet, but it'll probably be plugged in with our main storyline somehow. Now, for the most part, this northern section of the island is just going to be wilderness, like with this small pond here, and this grove of trees, and this area really is quite scenic. There is going to be 1 or 2 small modder plots which have already been claimed, but for the most part it's just going to be pristine wilderness with the occasional cavern or possibly a ruin in the future. And going over to the other side of the island, this is the sort of southern approach to the main mountain, which is actually a volcano. And this is just a sort of ashlands-like area, and Melkor has included some more excellent world building with this sort of Dunmer Stronghold ruin that's just built into the side of the mountain. And this does already have an interior made for it. It's an interior that I made, but we're going to skip over it, maybe include it in another video in the future. This video is already getting a little too long. We're almost at 19 minutes here. And over here on the very northern outskirts of the island, we have a goblin encampment of some sort. As far as I know, we haven't actually written a purpose for this goblin encampment, and it's probably going to have something to do with the main quest. And of course, ModTown 2015 has like a sort of central lake right here in the middle of the entire island, and it's quite a scenic area. You can just sort of see a large portion of the island from the middle of this lake, like the mountain over there, the Daedric ruins, and much of the city skyline. And it really has to be said that Melkor has just done an absolutely fantastic job with designing the landmass here. It really is quite beautiful, and you can just imagine what it's going to look like once everything is finished and all the files have been merged together. Now, the last thing we're going to do in this video is I just wanted to show off one of the dungeons I've been making for ModTown 2015. This is a mixture of Daedric ruins and caverns, and as you can see here, it is mostly underwater. The player will have to go through a long series of underwater tunnels in order to access the rest of the dungeon. And this is a fairly large dungeon. It's going to be about 3 to 4 interior cells in total, and this first interior cell is going to be quite large. The player will have to get quite a few water breathing potions just to get through it, I think. And I just wanted to sort of show off the sort of dungeon design principles I use with sort of building dungeons, since I never did get around to making that dungeon building tutorial that I promised everyone way back in, I think that was April or May? I will get to that eventually, but for now I'm just going to show off this dungeon here that I've designed. And it's sort of a complex system of caverns and Daedric ruins mixed together, and you'll notice that I use a pretty high level of detailing. There's about 1,200 objects in this interior cell, and that took about 12 to 13 development hours to put together, I think. And really the main thing with regards to how I design dungeons is that you'll notice there's a lot of detailing along the floors and walls of these caverns here. You'll see boulders, you'll see rocks, you'll see the occasional Daedric Ruin piece, and there's also tons of just hidden loot everywhere for the player to discover. And this is sort of how I like to design my dungeons, is that they feel very dynamic and also atmospheric. I want my dungeons to sort of tell a story through the environment. When the player travels through them, I want them to be traveling through a story. How did this piece get here? How did this corpse end up here? How did this loot end up there? That sort of thing. And I really think that just sort of adds to the immersion for the player, is when things sort of just all come together in a very dynamic and atmospheric way. And to sort of going on to the specific purpose of this dungeon, I've sort of got in mind that this dungeon is going to be a sort of hidden cult for Molag Bal. And you'll notice that it is a very atmospheric looking dungeon, if I do say so myself. I mean, I did design it, so I'm a bit biased with that regard. And I should also point out that we do have a ton of other dungeons in development. Hybrid Disorder, for example, is making an excellent looking dungeon. We have screenshots on our forums, and you should definitely check that out. But just going on, this cult here is going to be fairly well equipped. It isn't going to be like your typical Morrowind cult that only seems to have a couple of sleeping rolls and nothing else really in regards to supplies. These guys are pretty well settled in. They have tables, they have keg stands, they have beer and alcohol, they have alchemy stations. They're a very well equipped group, which is to me a bit more realistic. I mean, if you have a cult living in a sort of Daedric ruin for a long period of time, they should have some pretty well established areas, I think. And sort of moving on, you'll notice in that last area that there was some dining space and sleeping quarters. And in total, there's going to be about 20 to 30 cultists living in this Daedric ruin. It's a very large operation, as you might imagine. And there's going to be a few quests involved with this Daedric ruin, along with a ton of other things for you to find and discover. And the layout with this second interior here is that there's going to be a sort of kitchen space on the top level, since cultists do need to eat after all, with some worshipping areas down here on the second level, with some sleeping quarters and some additional dining space as well. And you'll notice that the design of this interior is sort of like a pyramid. It's very small at the top and widens out towards the bottom. And the very bottom level, as you can see here, is sort of submerged, going along with that sunken Daedric ruin theme. And there's a ton of caverns that branch out from this central chamber and sort of expand out into additional interiors and the rest of the dungeon, because it is a very large dungeon indeed. But anyway, that pretty much wraps up all the progress I can show you guys on ModTown 2015, at least in video form. You're more than welcome to stop by our website and check out the forums. There's an absolute ton of screenshots being posted on there, and we have a very talented pool of modders working on this project. And of course, it has to be said that you're more than welcome to join in and participate with ModTown 2015 yourself. It is, after all, a project by the community, for the community. Anything that you can contribute, whether it's writing, interior design, or 3D models, is more than welcome and can probably be used in some form or another. And anyway, that pretty much wraps up everything, so I'll see you guys next month with another ModTown 2015 progress update video.